How important is the Yemen Hub to the 9/11 investigation? Well, it's the essence of everything because if we believe the the history that this was the Al Qaeda switchboard around the world, in which Bin Laden's satellite phone had over 100 calls from 1992 to 1998 between his satellite phone and the Yemen Hub, I would happen to think that this house is the essence of what the intelligence agencies knew about 9/11 and what they knew about prior operations. Now, this is something that regularly is not talked about in internet forums. You rather talk about the collapses of the towers, whether they came down by controlled demolition or not. Well, you still don't have a suspect to point. Well, I'm showing you that we can actually point to a suspect here. And that's the intelligence agencies. It always has been. They're the primary entities involved in either manipulating the operation and allowing these attacks to happen, or even facilitating the attacks. But we have to really delve into this topic a lot further because at this point, there's no discussion about this. It's because most of you still don't believe that the planes were hijacked. And if you don't have hijackers, you don't have to investigate things like the Yemen Hub, Alec Station, Able Danger. You stopped right then and there. All conversation is ended. Blame the Illuminati, blame the White House, blame the Jews, corporations, the Pentagon. Well, I'm not saying you don't have to blame them, but it doesn't involve everybody. So between the years 1996 and 2001, the NSA had monitored all calls incoming and receiving from the Yemen Hub. When Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi entered the United States, Khalid al-Mihdhar made 7 phone calls from San Diego, that's where he was staying, to the Yemen Hub. Now, Khalid al-Mihdhar is married to the daughter of the owner of the house, Ahmed al-Hadam, making him the son-in-law. And that's the reason why he called so many times. However, the NSA intercepted those calls. And if they happened to share that with the FBI probably would have arrested these people or detained them or monitored them and probably would have at least stopped the hijacking of Flight 77. Because Nawaf al-Hazmi and Khalid al-Mihdhar were involved with the hijacking of Flight 77. At least that much we know. If they couldn't stop the whole plot, couldn't get them to talk. And also, at the same time, you have the CIA, who knew about Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi, that were traveling from the high-level al-Qaeda meeting in Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur, which was held in a condo by Yassi Sufat, a Malaysian businessman with Saudi ties. And at that meeting was Khalid Sheikh Mohammed Ramzi bin al-Shib, Ridwan Nasruddin, who goes by Hambali, the famous terrorist from the Philippines. Later on, Zacharias Moussaoui was alleged to be there, Khalid al-Mihdhar, Nawaf al-Hazmi, and of course, the person by who the CIA called Khalid, which is Walid bin Atash. So this was a high-level meeting, and the CIA got intelligence that they went from there to a hotel room in the United Arab Emirates where they took pictures when Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi went away from their room, took pictures of Mihdhar's passport, which had a U.S. visa. They shared that with the Alec Station, virtual station, and that information was not shared with the FBI either. So the CIA and the NSA knowingly withheld information about Al Qaeda subjects coming into the United States. The NSA did a lot worse because they were monitoring the calls of Khalid al-Mihdhar here in the States, didn't share with the FBI. So what we need to do is pressure to get cables of those phone calls, transcript of those phone calls from the NSA. What were they listening to for those 6 years? 6 years prior to the attacks. You don't think that Al Qaeda subjects were actually talking about that operation in code, primitive code? The CIA was begging the NSA to give them the other half of the transcript because the CIA actually had a bug in the house, but they couldn't listen to the phone calls that were coming in because they didn't have a tap on the line. And so they asked the NSA. It was actually Michael Scheuer, who is the the deputy chief of Alec Station in 1998, 96 to 99, who asked Barbara McNamara, the deputy director of the NSA, to get the other half of the transcript. They refused. So who was calling in and who was calling out? Well, the CIA knew who was calling out, and they didn't share that information with the FBI or the State Department. That's classified. And the NSA were listening to incoming and outgoing calls, and they didn't share the incoming calls with the CIA or the FBI or the State Department. So the NSA is the primary agency here regarding data, signals intelligence, meaning phone calls, emails, text messages. In this case, phone calls, transcripted phone calls. Later on, former senior executive of the NSA, Thomas Drake, legendary crypto analyst William Binney, both came out later and said that the NSA had so much data regarding Al Qaeda and the hijackers, the alleged 19 that were named by the FBI. They had so much data on those guys that they could have stopped the 9/11 attacks completely. All right, if the NSA had that, why didn't they? Because according to Thomas Drake and Willie Binney, the NSA told them they didn't have the manpower to describe that data. Whether you believe it or not, the most important operation in the world in terms of intelligence in the world was this place, the Ahmed al-Hada house. No place on earth had more attention involved than that place. Al Qaeda, bin Laden were the most talked about entity and agency in the world at the time. You had the East Africa bombings, the two fatwas against the United States. He had numerous declarations up until that point. The USS Cole bombing of 2000, the Millennium Plot, all this warnings, intelligence warnings from around the world. And you couldn't transcribe those calls. That's what we need to know. We need to declassify those cables, those transcripts, but they're classified right now because we still have a trial for the Guantanamo 5. The ones that were allegedly involved with 9/11 attacks: Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, Ramzi bin al-Shibh, Wali bin Attash, Abdulaziz Ali, Mustafa al-Hasnawi. Right? Those are the five guys: the financier, the orchestrator, the conduit. That's Ramzi bin al-Shibh between the hijackers and Germany. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the alleged mastermind, the orchestrator of the plot, who came up with the idea of hijacking planes and crashing them. Mustafa al-Hasnawi is the financier, allegedly, making wire transfers through MoneyGram to a number of the hijackers, especially Mohammed Atta, tens of thousands of dollars. Another financier is Abdulaziz Ali. And of course, Wali bin Attash, who is the coordinator between hijackers and other terrorist cells. My working theory is that the Arabs, these terrorists, came up with the plot, and that the intelligence agencies, most notably the CIA and the NSA, got wind of the plot, the planes operation, and manipulated it. And they allowed the Saudis and Israelis intelligence to get involved with the monitoring of the hijackers inside the United States, because the CIA is not allowed to conduct operations inside the United States. And they had to make sure that the operation had to be overseas, because they didn't want to share the information with the FBI or State Department. The FBI, if they knew that the operations inside the United States, they're in charge. But when it comes to international terrorism, the CIA is in charge. I think they knew. That's my working theory. I think that a specific few at the NSA and CIA knew about the operation and told maybe one or two people at the State Department, and then they got involved with allowing the Saudis and Israelis, because that's who benefited from the what came afterwards, the global war on terror. And a blank check was written to the NSA to allow monitoring of Americans, not just here, but abroad, breaking every constitutional right of Americans. Worse off under the Obama administration, because then they allowed the cell phone companies to hand over clients' data to the NSA without a warrant. The NSA continued operations. Nobody was held accountable, even with the two congressional inquiries, which were a sham, especially the 9/11 Commission. At least a joint House inquiry tried to get answers from the intelligence agencies. 9/11 Commission basically ignored information and held private, closed-door, non-public testimonies, not made public. Thomas Drake, Condoleezza Rice. I just interviewed Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Schaefer for Able Danger. Didn't even use his information, and they blackballed him. They had so much information about terrorist cells inside the United States, didn't even bother to address it in the 9/11 Commission report. Mark Rossini, who I just interviewed, blackballed because he wanted to tell, him and Doug Miller were trying to warn FBI headquarters about Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi entering the United States. CIA refused to allow that information to be shared with FBI headquarters. Why? Because they wanted to turn Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi into informants? Well, I don't buy it. I think the NSA and some people at the CIA knew what was going to happen. I wouldn't put it past Alfreda Ambikowski. She's a sociopath. Alfreda Ambikowski is one of the highest CIA case officers at Alec Station. She ended up marrying the former deputy chief of Alec Station, Michael Scheuer, who we already know is off the handle mentally. No matter how experienced he is with international terrorism, he was an expert. However, he's unstable. Made some disparaging remarks about John O'Neill, who heads the I-49 unit, counterterrorism unit in New York. So what I'm imploring you, the Truth Movement, you guys got to get on the ball. You have to stop talking about these outrageous conspiracy theories like no planes, no hijackers, Judy Wood space beams. They're all meant to distract you from the truth right here. This is just one issue, but it's a major issue. Nobody's talking about it. How come? You want to point fingers? Here we got some fingers to point. Why didn't the 9/11 Commission and Joint House Inquiry fully investigate the issue with the NSA at the Yemen Hub? They had him on stand. Michael Hayden, Director Michael Hayden of the NSA, barely asked him a question. At least with George Tenet, they did a little bit of pressure, but he basically sidestepped almost every important question regarding why they didn't share that data with the FBI or how many agents read that cable. Remember, when he's being investigated in the Joint House inquiry, he's asked a question by Carl Levin. Bless his heart, he actually asked a tough question to George Tenet. Why didn't the CIA share the information about Khalid al-Mihdhar to the FBI? And who was responsible for reading that cable that came in? Well, I could tell you the name. Her name is Michelle Ann Casey. She read the cable first, took it to Tom Wilshire, who's the deputy director of Alec Station at the time. And the first person to actually read that cable before they did was FBI agent Doug Miller, who drafted the cable trying to warn FBI headquarters about two hijackers that were coming to the United States, and they had to get authorization from the CIA to send it. And Tom Wilshire told Michelle Ann Casey, hold off per Wilshire. That's what they wrote on the cable. And then when Mark Rossini went to Michelle Ann Casey, told what's holding up the cable, she told him it's not an FBI matter. We think the operation's overseas. That means if the operation's overseas, CIA is in charge. If it comes in the United States, it's the FBI. And that's it. 9/11 finished. At least with Flight 77. At the very least. Who knows if he decides to talk? Khalid al-Mihdhar, if he's arrested, detained, whatever. Nawaf al-Hazmi would have at least stopped 9/11 right there. Because they're the first ones to enter the country. They're the ones who met with Khalid Sheikh Mohammed at the Al-Qaeda high meetings in Malaysia. Would have told them about the meeting at least. Just like how the Philippines in 1996 got wind of the Bajinka plot. And they arrested Abdul Hakim Murad. And he spilled the beans. And he basically told them about what they were planning, which was bombing of 12 airliners, putting urea nitrate bombs and nitroglycerin in Timex watches, have them put on the seats, and the planes explode all at the same time. While one plane gets hijacked and crashed into CIA Langley, it was Abdul Hakim Murad, who was a pilot. He trained here in the United States, by the way. And he told Philippine investigators, lead investigator Rodolfo Mendoza, that there were sleeper cells inside the United States 5 years before the attacks. Who the hell were these guys? Well, at least one of them we know was Hani Anjur. How do we know that? Because Arizona FBI, led by Kenneth Williams, who had an informant named Harry Samit, who went by the name of Abu Yusuf. He was friendly with Muslims because he was a convert. And he basically said that there were a number of people, Arabs, in flight training schools, and they hated America. One of them was Hani Anjur. That information went to Ken Williams, and then later on, Ken Williams penned the Phoenix Memo. This is an important memorandum by Kenneth Williams. He sent that to the State Department. He sent that to Robert Mueller, the director of the FBI. He sent that to Louis Freeh just before he left office and was replaced by Mueller. They ignored it. The intelligence was there. The FBI, there are some, not everybody, when you hear about how everybody in the government is corrupt, that's not the case. Okay, there was some good people in the FBI who basically tried to warn their superiors something is coming. That intelligence was global. Italy, even Israel, Saudi Arabia. But of course, the reports were vague. And everybody knew bin Laden was trying to plant something inside the United States. That wasn't a secret. So when Condoleezza Rice goes before the 9/11 Commission and says, we had no idea they were going to use planes as weapons, they knew back in 96 with the intelligence report from the FBI about the Bajinka plot. Unless the FBI didn't share that information, that could have been a possibility. Not according to Louis Freeh, the director of the FBI at the time. So you see what I mean? You have numerous FBI whistleblowers, Colleen Rowley, Harry Samit from Minneapolis, regarding Zacharias Moussaoui, trying to get a FISA warrant for his laptop because he's a foreign agent inside the United States. They needed a FISA warrant to open up his laptop. They were refused until the day after 9/11. Then they got the laptop open. A little bit too late, knowing that he was trying to rent out crop dusters. Reason why Zacharias Moussaoui was caught before 9/11 was because he made numerous suspect questions to Minneapolis, I think it was Egan, where he tried to get to a flight school and he asked about how to fly a plane, not to land it. And there was a lot of other questions that this guy actually, Clarence Prevost, who was in contact with, this is the guy who was talking with Zacharias Moussaoui through email, through the phone. He contacted the FBI. FBI started following Moussaoui. They arrested him in a hotel room with Hussein al-Attas. Al-Attas had on his person a martyrdom will. So you had reports from Robert Wright Jr., and FBI agent from Chicago, counterterrorism unit out of Chicago, where he worked on a project Vulgar Betrayal, which implicated Yassin Al-Qadi, where he wrote a detailed book about the FBI preventing him from publish what he found regarding Al-Qaeda finances. One of the very first FBI agents to blow the whistle. Ken Williams, later on, he tried his best, and the FBI actually told him later, after the 9/11 attacks, this is what the FBI told him: don't help the victims' families in their civil suit against Saudi Arabia. This is the FBI we're talking about. A federal agency inside the United States, a law enforcement federal agency, asking one of its own agents not to assist the victims' families with their Saudi lawsuit. He refused to work with that. He's retired now. Ken Williams, Robert Wright Jr., Colleen Raleigh, Harry Samad, Mark Rossini, Doug Miller, these guys tried to warn the United States something was coming inside the United States. It's time, high time, to investigate the Ahmed al-Hada home and what the NSA and the CIA knew. Because as long as you're going to believe in the outrageous conspiracy theories or keep declaring that, did you know a third building fell? Yes. Guess what? We knew about a third building. Why? Because for 2 weeks on 24-hour news coverage, that's all they were talking about. They kept showing World Trade Center 7 collapsing. 2 weeks. I have the video broadcasts. They're on my YouTube channel. If you're going to ask somebody in Oregon in the year 2017, did you know a third building fell on 9/11? What the hell would they know? If you're going to ask a 30-year-old or a 25-year-old about that question, well, that's pretty stupid. What the hell would they know about World Trade Center 7? They're on the West Coast. So you understand where I'm going with that? If you keep repeating the same old thing, people are going to get bugged of you. They're going to get tired of you. They're not even going to follow you anymore. It's time to start expanding your borders. Because whether or not, if you believe that the towers came out for controlled demolition, bombs or whatever, I'm in that camp. I think bombs actually were inside the World Trade Center. I mean, you have people in the basement levels saying that they heard explosions. The basement levels. Well, guess what was blown up in the basement in 1993? The World Trade Center. Ramsey Youssef. He gave the plot, the outline. You weaken the base supports of the World Trade Center, and what he wanted to do was blow up the support beams in the basement levels. He was in basement level 2, and he had a giant bomb, but he didn't have it big enough. But he had it at the wrong. He parked it. I think it was actually 40 yards away from a spot where he wanted the tower to lean over into the other tower, and they both collapsed into the city. That would have been worse than 9/11. It would have been just monumental. But he gave the blueprint on how to weaken the tower. So yes, I mean, what I'm trying to say is that these conspiracy theories purported, like I said before, about no planes and no hijackers or planes switches drones. Well, guess what? There's no hijackers. Who are we blaming? The intelligence apparatuses were monitoring the hijackers. Well, guess what? There's no hijackers. There's no intelligence agencies monitoring these people. You basically absolved everybody from 9/11. Clean. Thanks to you. Thanks to your ignorance in believing the likes of like Barbara Honegger or Christopher Boland or Rebecca Roth, loose change. Stop watching these people. They're dead ends. What are they doing now? Where is Christopher Boland, by the way? Missing almost 2 years now. Because you keep repeating the same things, you run out of things to say. How much more can you say? Rebecca Roth, not even a flight attendant, got you to believe she was a flight attendant for 30 years. Anybody can write a book. Anybody can make a YouTube video. But it's up to you, the person watching them, to investigate the claims they make. Hell, I hope you do the same for me. Hope you're not taking my word for it. Everything I say, you can look up for yourself. I'm not selling you anything. I'm not telling you to buy anything on my channel. I even have a Patreon account. Well, guess what, guys? It's up to you to act as investigators and stop looking at 9/11 like hobbyists. Because that's what you are. You're a bunch of cheerleaders on the side with your little placards and your flags on a corner. 9/11 is an inside job. Well, that's not enough. It's time to go to the courts. Open up. Try to open up some freedom of information requests about documents, files that are not viewed to the public. I just gave you one. But I could just tell you right now, it's probably a pipe dream because we still have the trial and that's classified. I'm 99.9% that the cables from the NSA and CIA regarding Yemen Hub are classified. But we still have millions of files at the 9/11 Commission that have classified. But now 9/11 Commission's over, those files could still be opened up through a freedom of information request. I mean, Judicial Watch did a great job. Adam Larson at Scribd. Go look at those files and documents. Stop reading from Craig McKee's blog, for God's sakes. Be serious about this. We need more serious people because if we don't, it'll be another 20 years that somebody like myself will make a video and beg you or your kids to do the same. And then all hope is lost because it'll end up just like in the way of JFK. The finger pointing is not in the towers. It's in the geopolitical arm of 9/11. Like I said, whether you want to believe the towers came down for controlled demolition or not, you can't point a finger because we still don't know who came into the World Trade Center to put bombs or thermite or any other incendiary device. However, I could point to names about people who were listening, who were receiving information, and who didn't share that information. I could point fingers, and we could bring these people to a court of law and hold them accountable. We got to hope this anyway, because if we don't, we might as well just become a cheerleader on a sidewalk.